Hey everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm coming on today to share with you guys a start to finish process video of how I made this adorable Mother's Day card for my mom. I fell in love with this clearly besotted stamp set called Puppy Love because it's a little mini set, so it's not that expensive, yet it has 3 adorable images of these puppies that look so much like my little bandito. Inside, I just kept it really simple. I hand wrote the sentiment, Happy Mother's Day to the best dog grandma. And outside, I kept it just focused on the puppies. I'm going to share with you guys no-line Copic coloring for fur, especially white fur. Now, this is the little stamp set. I think it's so darn cute. The puppies are in really fun positions, and I'm using Memento Desert Sand ink, which is like a kind of sandy color, which I thought would be easily hidden with some Copic coloring and some jelly roll white gel pen. So I'm going to go through coloring up these 3 puppies so you can see it repeatedly how I'm going about doing this. So for this first puppy, I'm just trying to mark in where the brown spots are on my bandito. And I first laid in this light color, and then I'm laying in the darkest shadowed color. I'm sorry, my video skipped a little bit, but you can see I'm just layering in color. So I started with the base lightest E11, then I went with the darker E57. Then I'm trying to bridge the gap between the two with the E13. And I know it's looking a little freaky. That's just because the eyes and the nose haven't been inked in yet with a Copic multiliner pen. And I think that like the gap between the colors between the E13 and E57 is too big. So I reached over and picked up an E15. And I think that bridges the gap really nicely. That color difference between the 57 and the 13 was too big, and I could have done point-to-point coloring, but I decided to use the mid-tone, the E15. And now I'm using a Copic multiliner pen. That is a pen that is Copic marker friendly, so it won't bleed or smear, even if I want to go in and color more around where I have inked in the eyes and the nose. And it's a fine point so that I can make sure that I leave the white highlights. Now I'm coloring in the brown spot that Bandito has on his back, and I'm going through the same color waves, the E11, then the E13, and I know it looks a little bit funny. That's just because the tuft of hair at the top of his head, I'm trying to keep white because that's Bandito's markings. And now I'm going in with the darkest E57, and I'm going back in around his ears and around the sides of his face as well, just because I want to reestablish that darker color after layering in the midtones, because midtone colors tend to bleach out that darkest color, and I wanted the deepest shadows to be brought back in. Now for the white area of the fur, I'm using an W0 and a W1, and these are very pale warm grays, and that's because I don't want the white just to be a flat white, and I'm using little flicking marks, marking in where I think there might be kind of shadowed areas in the fur, around the bridge of the nose where the muzzle meets the forehead, around under the muzzle, around under the nose. And it might look a little bit dark to you, but that's okay because, oh, and you'll see here, my W1 is just blotching out, but I'm not worried about this because I'm going to be adding some detail markings with a jelly roll pen. But you can see, you know, usually if I was coloring and blobs of ink would come out like this, the image would be ruined. But for this image, because I'm using this jelly roll pen, I'm going to be able to hide a multitude of sins, not only where these blobs of ink came out, and that's because I had overfilled the marker the last time I had filled it up with ink or used a refiller, but also it hides the brown outline of the image that I had inked up with that Memento Desert Sand ink. So you can see I'm just trying to get the ink flowing again. Sometimes it kind of dries up that point, And what I normally do is I blow on it to get the heat of my breath to loosen up that ink again at the point, or I rub it against my index finger, and the skin warmth makes the ink flow again. Now for the second puppy, I'm going to start with the white areas. It doesn't really make a difference which area you color up first, but I thought this way I could show you guys what I'm thinking about when I'm coloring up the white areas. So that tuft of fur around its chest, and underneath the chin, and at the forehead, I am layering in some warm grays. I first layered in with the W0, and now I'm going in with a darker shadowed area, the cast shadow of that tuft of fur at the chest, and underneath the little puppy's chin, I'm using that darker warm W1. And that really makes sure that you get that sense of that cast shadow where there's 3D kind of layering. The forefront area, like where the muzzle is, it's lighter, and underneath as that cast shadow, and I'm layering in that darker warm W1. Now with the Jelly Roll pen, I'm again able to hide some of the miscolored areas where I might have flicked too heavy, or and I'm also able to hide some of that tan color of the image ink, and it really adds so much texture. This white Jelly Roll pen is fantastic for getting in that furry texture, that hair look. Now I'm going in to color up the brown areas. This time I'm going in first, now that I'm more confident of where the shadows are, with that darkest E57, and I'm layering in those ears at where the ear starts on the top of the head and at the bottom, and those little swaths of hair around the sides of the face, and the deepest inset areas around his eyes. And this time it looks a little less freaky because I've already inked in with the Copic multiliner pen the eyes and the nose. That's something that you normally would skip when you're using regular black ink, but because I inked up the puppy with that desert sand ink, you really need to re-establish the eyes and the nose with a Copic multiliner pen. And those pens, by the way, come not only in black, but also in, I think like a sepia and like a brown color. But for Little Bandito, I thought using the black was perfect. I'm again coloring up the last little puppy, layering in where I think the white hair will have a little bit of shadow around the base of where the muzzle and the face meet, the forehead, underneath the muzzle area, underneath the chin, underneath those little front paws that are in that kind of begging position. And then I go in with a darker W1. And, also you should know that when these inks dry, they do become a little bit lighter. So right now that W1 is looking crazy dark, but it will get lighter. And I'm just trying to make sure that I get the bottoms of each of the paws, the base of the tail, at the top of the muzzle, underneath the muzzle, under the chin. And now I'm using that white Jelly Roll pen to soften the ink lines of the image, as well as create more of a sense of furry texture. All along the white areas, using this white Jelly Roll pen has added so much of a better three-dimensional furry look, and also softened those line from the image itself. And I think at the end you'll see that this furry texture that's created with that white Jelly Roll pen is kind of magical. Now for the brown spots. This time I'm starting in with a lighter brown, and I'm extending the flicking a little bit further. With the E57, I'm just going just where the face is differentiated from the ears, at the base of some of these little swaths of fur. I'm adding that darker shading. At the ends on the sides of the face, I'm also adding some extra shading. And then I'm blending out with that E15. So you'll see that in the three images, the coloring is obviously not exactly the same, but using the same markers generally gets the images looking almost identical. Some of the puppies are a little bit lighter, some of them are a little bit darker, but that's okay because fur under different lighting looks different. So don't worry about trying to make 3 images look exactly the same. If you use the same markers, they'll generally come out similar. And if they don't, you can adjust by adding extra layers of the different shades, whether you want it to be darker. Well, that's really the only direction you can go. You can't go lighter once you've laid down a darker color, but you can definitely try to match the color tones using like the E15, the mid-tone and the darker tones. And then again, I'm going back in with a Jelly Roll pen to add some more little white wisps around the muzzle. And I decided to use this little scrap of damask pattern paper. It's kind of got a shine to it, but I'm using a sketch from the MFT Stamps blog. They have sketch challenges, color challenges, and if you're ever stuck for ideas, they're a great resource. But I've decided to create kind of a banner using this little strip of scrap paper. I'm cutting along that area, and then I'm going to just create a little banner there. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. You can see that I've marked with a pencil where the center line is, and that's kind of the basic shape. Then I've decided I'm gonna map this on some shimmery, darker pink cardstock, and I just wanted a little bit of contrast. So I decided I was gonna map that with that shimmery pink cardstock, and I'm gonna place this on the card front. You can see I had made a mistake and I'd pulled off the damask, so that's the back side. But that will never show. And I decided to position this over toward the right of the card front. And I've popped up all the little puppies on double-sided foam adhesive just to add a little extra interest and dimension. So they've all been popped up with this foam tape. And I'm going to position 2 of them on the top upper banner and 1 on the lower. And then I also found in my stash some wooden hearts. And I'm putting pink stickles on them to add a little sparkle, added dimension, but I need to let these dry overnight, or at least for a few hours. I'm using E6000 to also put a little something in the space, the gap between the 2 pennants, and that's a metal dog bone button. And this is the completed card. I think it came out so cute. That's the inside liner of the card. I used up the rest of the damask pattern paper and shimmery pink cardstock. And this is a close-up view of the card. I hope you've enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.